At 61 years old, Jim Carrey sat down for what he described as his very last interview. The man who spent decades turning the entire world into laughter was finally ready to speak the raw, unfiltered truth. For years, fans had always felt there was something darker, something haunted, lurking behind that explosive, almost frantic energy. And they were absolutely right. In 2025, Carey openly admitted that he'd been taking Prozac since the late 1980s to manage what he described as a constant, low-grade despair that never fully went away. But that wasn't even the heaviest part. What he revealed about his father's multiple suicide attempts and his own terrifying breaking points will completely reframe every single film performance he ever gave. James Eugene Carey was born on January 17, 1962, in the quiet town of Newmarket, Ontario, the youngest of four kids in a loud, overcrowded little house where big dreams and overdue bills fought for space every single month. His father, Percy, had once been a saxophonist in a traveling jazz band, but gave it all up for a safe accounting job at Titan Wheels factory in Scarborough, pulling in barely $8,000 a year. His mother, Kathleen, spent most of Jim's childhood sick in bed, battling chronic illnesses and heavy painkiller use. The family name had originally been Care, before Percy's French-Canadian ancestors anglicized it after immigrating. Inside that cramped home, young Jim watched his father's spirit slowly shrink. Percy was a born entertainer trapped in a gray cubicle, and Jim learned very early that working hard didn't always keep you safe. When he was 8, Jim discovered his escape in the bathroom mirror, twisting his face into wild expressions for hours until even his older siblings couldn't look away. By age 10, he was so sure of himself that he mailed a handwritten letter to Carol Burnett declaring he was already a master impressionist. He got a polite rejection form letter in return, but he taped it to his bedroom wall like it was a contract with Destiny. At school, he was unstoppable. He'd turn every lesson into a one-man show, impersonating teachers and celebrities until the principal kicked him out of class daily. Classmates nicknamed him Rubber Face, and for a kid whose family was always one step from broke, those laughs felt like currency. Then, in 1975, everything shattered. Titan Wheels closed without warning. Percy was 51, out of work, and sent 73 job applications across Ontario, every single one rejected. Savings vanished, Kathleen's medical bills swallowed the rest, and Percy ended up taking a janitor job for $4 an hour cleaning toilets in the exact kind of factory where he'd once been an accountant. 13-year-old Jim watched the man he idolized mopping floors for people who used to call him sir. The shame was crushing. Within months, they lost the house. From 1974 to 1976, the Carey family lived in a beat-up yellow Volkswagen camper van parked on the shores of Lake Ontario. Percy and Kathleen slept inside while Jim and his brother John pitched a tent beside it, waking up with frost on their sleeping bags and washing in gas station bathrooms before school. Some nights, Jim dug expired sandwiches out of dumpsters and heated them on the van's tiny stove. The whole family worked night shifts at a local factory, scrubbing floors and toilets for $32 per 8-hour shift. Jim dragged himself to Aldershot High half dead on his feet, clothes unwashed, brain foggy. By 15, Kathleen could barely walk. At 16, Jim dropped out entirely to work full-time beside his father, earning $4.25 an hour. He cleaned all night, came home at sunrise, lifted his mother out of bed, bathed her, cooked for her, and sat telling jokes until she smiled, because it was the only thing that kept him from falling apart. She called him my little sunshine, but inside he was drowning in fear. That nightmare lasted 2 solid years until everything almost ended one morning in 1982. 20-year-old Jim found his father unconscious on the bathroom floor, an empty pill bottle beside him. Paramedics rushed Percy to Joseph Brant Hospital and saved him by minutes. Later, Percy confessed he'd tried twice before during the campervan years. That terror, that the same darkness lived inside him, never left Jim. It became the engine that made him work until he dropped. Yet even through the pain, a tiny voice kept saying keep going. When Jim was 15, Percy drove him to his very first stand-up gig at Yuck Yucks in Toronto. Kathleen picked out a hideous bright polyester leisure suit because that's what comedians wore on TV. The set bombed hard, barely a clap, but Percy drove him home with quiet pride anyway. Failure on stage, Jim learned, wasn't death. It was practice that on his 16th birthday, he quit school for good. The family was still broke, everyone working janitor or factory shifts just to eat. Jim pulled 12-hour nights, napped in the van between shifts, and practiced impressions on his breaks. Don Adams, W.C. Fields, anything to keep his brain alive. Once a straight A student, he was now angry, withdrawn, and hurting. Comedy was the only thing that still felt like oxygen. The family slowly fractured under the weight. His siblings moved out. Percy sank deeper into depression, and Kathleen's painkiller habit turned into full addiction. Jim later said, "When your mom is high all the time, that's a kind of abandonment." He'd sit at the dinner table listening to her say things like, "My brain is rotting away," or "I could drop dead any second." Those words carved permanent scars. Laughter became his shield. He hid agony behind absurdity. At 17, he finally earned his first paid gig, $20 for 20 minutes at a tiny club called The Hoft. It wasn't much, but it proved he could make money making people laugh. In 1980, he auditioned for Saturday Night Live, certain he'd made it. He never even got in the room with Lorne Michaels. Producers told his agent, "I don't think Lorne would like it." The rejection crushed him, but it also forced him to stop copying legends and start creating his own wild characters. Behind every over-the-top face was invisible trauma. He'd been bullied relentlessly at school for being poor, mocked for worn-out clothes, sometimes so numb he'd hurt himself just to feel something. Years later, raw home footage surfaced in a documentary, so painful the producers kept it locked away for nearly 20 years. Every contortion, every manic movement on screen came from a kid who learned that if he could make people laugh, maybe they wouldn't notice he was breaking. Still, there were small sparks of light. Teachers at Aldershot sometimes let him perform in class instead of detention. One art teacher remembered him sketching perfect portraits while simultaneously doing a John Wayne impression. In 1981, at 19, he landed his first TV role in a low-budget Canadian film originally titled Introducing Janet, later renamed Rubberface, playing a struggling comic named Tony, basically himself. It didn't make him famous, but it was proof he belonged on screen. That same year, with exactly $200 in his pocket, he left Toronto for Los Angeles. He couch-surfed in comedy clubs, lived on free bar food, and auditioned anywhere that would let him in the door. By 1982, he was on stage at the Comedy Store, the same room that launched Richard Pryor and Robin Williams. One night, Rodney Dangerfield caught his act, loved it, and took the 20-year-old on tour as the opening act. Jim was the baby of the lineup, performing for thousands, yet still figuring out how to eat once a day. Tiny TV parts followed, barely paid, but every credit mattered. In 1983, he made $50 a week on a sketch show called The Sex and Violence Family Hour, sleeping in an empty apartment with no furniture and living on instant ramen. In 1984, he booked the lead in a sitcom called The Duck Factory, canceled after 13 episodes. Debt piled up again. Still, he refused to quit. In 1985 came his first real taste of Hollywood success, the vampire comedy Once Bitten. The movie cost $1.5 million and grossed almost $19 million. Critics shrugged, but audiences noticed the rubber-faced Canadian kid. Around the same time, life spun out of control again. Arrested for marijuana possession, a short fling with Mia Farrow, and a growing cocaine habit to survive all-night rehearsals. He later called those years some of his darkest. He auditioned for SNL 3 separate times, 1980, 1983, and 1986, and got rejected every single time. The final one stung worst. His Robin Williams impression bombed in the room. Instead of giving up, he doubled down on original, unhinged characters no one else would touch, like the soon-to-be iconic Fire Marshal Bill. In 1990, at age 28, he joined Fox's groundbreaking sketch show In Living Color. From day one, his energy was on another planet. Over 5 seasons, he created more than 120 sketches, but Fire Marshal Bill, with the melted face, crazed eyes, and "let me show you something," became legendary. He was the first white cast member to break out on a show built around black comedy giants like the Wayans family. Behind the scenes, though, he was burning himself out. To play characters like the grotesque bodybuilder Vera de Milo, he'd gain or lose 20 pounds in a week, slap himself, crash into walls, whatever it took. In 1992, he twisted his ankle mid-sketch and limped through the rest of the week in pain. He was earning $25,000 an episode and had just bought his first house in LA, but he was running on Adderall and fumes. His marriage to Melissa Womer, the waitress who'd known him pre-fame, was falling apart. Once In Living Color exploded, late nights, strip clubs, and infidelity took over. In 1995, she filed for divorce, citing cheating. The court files were brutal. The same seasons that pushed boundaries on air pushed executives to the edge off air. Sketches like Homeboy Shopping Network drew massive ratings and massive complaints. Fox panicked and started censoring the writers. Jim leaned harder into the chaos, mocking race, religion, everything, until he finally walked away in 1994. He didn't burn out. He blasted off. That same year, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective hit theaters. A $15 million gamble became a $72 million domestic smash, $107 million worldwide. Jim improvised almost 40% of the script. Alrighty then entered the lexicon overnight. He beat out 19 other actors, turned the movie into his personal playground, and rewrote comedy history. His salary jumped from $350,000 for the first Ace to $7 million for Dumb and Dumber, then $20 million for The Cable Guy. But the higher the paychecks, the harder he crashed. During the Dumb and Dumber press tour, he suffered a full nervous breakdown. Hallucinations, cocaine binges, calling himself a manic-depressive clown wearing a mask. Merchandise exploded. Millions of talking Ace Ventura dolls, lunchboxes, t-shirts. But Jim sued Warner Brothers for using his likeness without permission. He was the biggest comedy star on Earth and couldn't even control his own face. Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, 1995, earned him $15 million plus points and grossed $212 million worldwide. But he hated the animal cruelty jokes and fought the writers daily. The Mask, 1994, cost $18 million and made $352 million, launching Cameron Diaz and landing an Oscar nomination for visual effects. Dumb and Dumber grossed $270 million and became eternal, yet every blockbuster left scars. For The Truman Show, 1998, he almost drowned filming the storm sequence. 150 takes in an artificial ocean until he was physically rescued by crew. He refused to leave the set for weeks, isolating himself exactly like Truman. He won a Golden Globe but fought the director constantly. For Man on the Moon, 1999, he lost 40 pounds and stayed in Andy Kaufman character 24/7, so deep that Danny DeVito begged for breaks. He injected saline to fake cancer symptoms. Another Golden Globe, another divorce, this time from Lauren Holly after less than a year. Batman Forever, 1995, made $336 million, but anxiety attacks and Valium became daily routine. Tommy Lee Jones famously hated working with him. Liar Liar, 1997, earned $300 million on 60% improvised lines, but Jim sued the studio for unpaid bonuses. The Cable Guy, 1996, terrified Matthew Broderick on and off camera. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, 2000, made $345 million. But the prosthetic torture left him with permanent back issues. In 2015, his on-again, off-again girlfriend Catriona White died of an overdose, leaving a note blaming him. Wrongful death lawsuits flew. Texts and missing prescription bottles surfaced. The case was dismissed in 2018, but the damage was permanent. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, 2004, showed the world a quiet, broken Jim. No jokes, just pain. He shaved his head on camera and sank into real depression during the 17-hour shooting days. His daughter Jane was diagnosed with autism. Years later, she publicly distanced herself, calling some of his views toxic. His father Percy died in 2006. Jim paid $10 million for the funeral, full circle from the camper van. He kept returning. Sonic the Hedgehog, 2020, made $319 million. Sonic 2 almost killed him with pneumonia. Sonic 3 paid $30 million and came with a script printed in real 24-karat gold ink. He laughed and said he only came back because he bought a lot of stuff. In 2017, he went viral at Fashion Week declaring, "There is no me." Years of Eckhart Tolle, meditation, and what he calls Christ consciousness. He painted hundreds of canvases about forgiveness and suffering. In 2025, with his films having grossed well over $5 billion worldwide. 2 Golden Globes, but 0 Oscars. He sat quietly and said the line that sums it all up.